Sterling Maddox gazed at the distant ridge where 70 Apache warriors remained perfectly still on their mounts, their eyes fixed on him. They'd been positioned there since first light, quiet as stone carvings, neither moving forward nor pulling back, just observing. His hand drifted to the empty holster on his hip, searching not for a missing weapon, but for comfort that seemed equally gone. The day before, that same ridge had been deserted. The day before, he'd made what felt like a straightforward decision. The day before, he'd surrendered his only horse to transport an injured Apache woman to her people, stranding himself 20 miles from civilization. Now those 70 warriors gripped something puzzling in their hands. Each man held a single white feather, yet Sterling had never witnessed Apaches using white feathers for any purpose. Not in war decorations, not in rituals he'd learned of. Nothing. The woman, Ayanna, she'd breathed her name before passing out, was absent from their ranks. Sterling had prepared himself for arrows. He'd braced for battle cries. He'd readied himself to face consequences for entering Apache lands, even with honorable motives. Instead, they simply observed. And that quietness seemed more threatening than any war shout could be. Because throughout his frontier years, Sterling understood one constant truth. Apaches never acted without purpose. And whatever purpose brought 70 warriors to sit in flawless arrangement, gripping white feathers while studying a lone, defenseless cowboy. That purpose remained completely beyond his comprehension. But as the dawn sun rose higher, stretching long shadows between himself and the quiet warriors, Sterling started understanding that surrendering his horse had triggered something governed by laws he didn't know existed, something that would require more from him than he'd ever thought possible. The real question wasn't what they sought from him. The real question was what he'd already committed to unknowingly. The previous day's events replayed vividly in Sterling's thoughts as he examined the unmoving warriors. He'd been traveling through the canyon when a faint groan reached his ears, bouncing off the stone barriers. Tracking the sound, he discovered her lying near a dry stream bed, crimson staining a crude bandage wrapped around her leg. The injury appeared badly infected, and fever burned her skin. Any rational person would have ridden on. Apache land spelled death for intruders, and aiding one of their women might be interpreted as disrespect or something worse. But something in Ayanna's black eyes had frozen him completely. Not begging exactly, but a kind of quiet strength that brought back memories of his own sister's last hours. Sterling had positioned Ayanna on his horse without speaking. She was too feeble to object, fading in and out of awareness as he guided the animal by foot across the harsh landscape. For 6 hours, he traveled beside his mount while she leaned in the saddle, sometimes murmuring Apache phrases he couldn't comprehend. When they reached her territory's boundary, identified by 3 unique red stones, he'd eased her down and observed her stagger toward a group of traditional homes ahead. Then he'd done something that still baffled him. Rather than reclaiming his horse, he'd smacked the creature's side and directed it to follow her. The horse trailed Ayanna like an obedient companion, and Sterling had remained there without resources, watching his sole valuable asset vanish into Apache country. Now 18 hours afterward, his muscles ached from nighttime walking. His water supply was almost depleted, and 70 Apache warriors were regarding him like a riddle requiring solution. The white feathers reflected the dawn glow, yet their significance stayed as cryptic as the silence bridging the ridge and Sterling's position. One warrior, a figure with silver threading through his dark hair, lifted his hand subtly. The others reacted immediately, repositioning their horses into a new pattern, not aggressive, but intentional, measured, like game pieces shifting on a board following principles Sterling never studied. The primary warrior started down the ridge, still clutching his white feather. The rest stayed absolutely motionless, but Sterling sensed their focus like tangible pressure. Every survival instinct urged him to flee, but where could he escape on foot across this boundless terrain? As the warrior drew near, Sterling spotted something that froze his blood. The man displayed a necklace of tiny bones, and secured to his belt was a scalp of brown hair that appeared disturbingly recognizable. The shade matched Sterling's own hair precisely, yet the warrior's gaze held no fury, no killing rage. Instead, they revealed something far more disturbing. They revealed anticipation, as though Sterling should grasp something that remained entirely outside his understanding. The warrior halted 10 feet distant and uttered a single Apache word. Then he indicated Sterling's torso directly and spoke it again, his tone carrying a strange note of honor that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. The Apache phrase lingered in the space between them like an unanswerable challenge. The warrior's lined face displayed no hostility, but his stare required some response Sterling couldn't provide. Behind him, the 70 mounted warriors stayed frozen like statues, their white feathers forming a strange sight against the severe morning heavens. Sterling cleared his windpipe and attempted the common gesture of peace, lifting both palms gradually. "I mean no harm. I assisted your woman because she needed help. Nothing more." The warrior angled his head slightly, as if Sterling had spoken something notable but incorrect. He voiced the Apache word again, this time touching his heart before gesturing toward the ridge where Ayanna had vanished yesterday. When Sterling continued showing confusion, the warrior did something surprising. He grinned. It wasn't a warm grin. It was the expression someone wore when possessing knowledge that would alter everything. The warrior reached into a hide pouch on his side and extracted an item that made Sterling's inside sink. It was his horse's bridle, the custom piece with unique silver decorations his father had presented him. But the leather now bore small painted markings that absolutely hadn't existed yesterday. The warrior displayed the bridle and spoke once more using fresh Apache terms, but maintaining that same respectful tone. He indicated Sterling, then the painted markings, then Sterling again. The implication was clear. These markings symbolized something regarding Sterling's deed, and that something held enough importance to summon 70 warriors to witness. From a ridge, a fresh sound descended, voices singing, high tones blending together in a melody that raised goosebumps on Sterling's skin. But this wasn't a war chant. He'd encountered Apache war songs previously, and they bore no resemblance to this. This tune conveyed celebration, thankfulness, and something else he couldn't place, something that resembled lamentation. The warrior registered Sterling's bewilderment and acknowledged it with approval, as though Sterling's lack of knowledge was precisely what he anticipated. He returned the bridle to his pouch and withdrew something else, a second white feather matching those the other warriors carried. He presented it to Sterling with both palms, speaking gently in Apache. Sterling stared at the feather. Taking it seemed like accepting something undefined, but declining it might prove worse. The warrior remained patient, still extending the feather between them, while the singing from the ridge intensified and grew more elaborate. Eventually, Sterling extended his hand and accepted the feather. The instant his fingers grasped it, the warrior acknowledged it with profound satisfaction and pivoted to signal the others. Instantly, the complete formation started moving, not toward Sterling, but alongside his location, as though preparing to guide him somewhere. But guide him where? And why did accepting a simple feather feel like he'd just agreed to terms written in an incomprehensible language? The singing persisted, and Sterling understood with mounting anxiety that the melody was approaching. Additional voices were contributing from somewhere behind him. When he rotated, his pulse nearly halted. Appearing from a canyon he hadn't even registered was a line of Apache women and youngsters, headed by an aged man wearing an ornate feathered crown. And there, moving beside the elder but progressing slowly because of her wounded leg, was Ayanna. She was living, alert, and looking straight at Sterling with an expression blending thankfulness with something resembling sympathy. The elderly man with the elaborate crown approached Sterling with movements suggesting both ritual and intention. His lined face carried the authority that came from generations of making choices affecting whole communities. Behind him, the line of women and children continued their singing, but Sterling noticed them observing his every action with keen interest. Ayanna limped ahead, protecting her injured leg, but advancing with resolve. When she reached Sterling, she addressed him in measured English, her accent heavy, but her meaning unmistakable. My grandfather desires to acknowledge the white man who restored life to his granddaughter. Sterling felt his confusion multiply. I simply aided someone injured. Anyone would have acted similarly. Ayanna conveyed his statement to the elder, who listened carefully, then responded in flowing Apache. His manner suggested he was correcting something significant. Ayanna acknowledged and faced Sterling, her dark gaze earnest. My grandfather states your words hold no truth. Most men wouldn't have assisted. Most white men would have continued past or acted worse. But you surrendered your most precious belonging to rescue an enemy's life. This isn't what anyone would do. This is the behavior of someone following ancient principles. The elder moved closer and rested his palm on Sterling's shoulder. When he spoke again, his voice held deep feeling that crossed language divides. Ayanna listened intently before conveying his words. He states, you have respected the holy law of the horse offering. When a warrior surrenders his war animal to preserve a life, he connects himself to that life and that life's community. You didn't understand this law, but not knowing doesn't void the connection. You are now linked to our tribe in ways requiring acknowledgement. Sterling's throat went dry. Linked? How? What does that mean precisely? The singing ceased suddenly, and the abrupt quiet felt threatening. The elder studied Sterling's expression for an extended moment, then voiced a single Apache word. Every warrior on the ridge responded by lifting their white feathers high overhead. The action resembled a tribute, but Sterling perceived there was deeper meaning than simple acknowledgement. Ayanna's expression turned worried as she conveyed the message. He states, the connection demands a selection. The holy law requires that the giver of the horse offering must now demonstrate whether his spirit truly reflects his deeds. If so, he enters the tribe as kin. If not, she hesitated, glancing anxiously at the armed warriors encircling them. If not what? Sterling questioned, though he suspected he didn't want the response. If not, the offering was deception, and lies regarding sacred matters must face consequences. The horse would be given back to you, but your spirit would be judged corrupted. You would be identified as someone who claims honor through dishonest kindness. Sterling surveyed the 70 warriors, the elder's steady stare, and Ayanna's troubled face. He was caught between two options he didn't completely grasp, both of which would transform his existence permanently. The white feather in his grip suddenly felt weightier than his absent horse, and he grasped that his basic act of compassion had somehow activated an ancient ceremony he was entirely unprepared for. The elder spoke once more, and this time his phrases carried the burden of finality. Ayanna's translation struck Sterling like a physical impact. The selection ceremony commences at sundown. Until then, you are our visitor. After sundown, you will be either our kinsman or our adversary. No third option exists. The Apache settlement was nothing like Sterling had pictured. Concealed in a natural hollow between massive rock structures, it featured traditional dwellings positioned in exact arrangements that revealed generations of thoughtful design. What impressed him most was the total lack of hostility. Children observed him with genuine curiosity. Women acknowledged him courteously as he moved past, and men examined him with looks suggesting they were evaluating something he couldn't recognize. Ayanna walked alongside him, her limp more visible now, but her determination steadfast. You're questioning why nobody displays fear or anger toward a white man in their holy place, she noted. Sterling acknowledged. The thought occurred to me. I anticipated something else. Fear and anger belong to enemies. You aren't yet enemy, and you aren't yet kin. You are between realms, which makes you holy until the selection ceremony discloses your genuine nature. She stopped beside a large cooking pit where several women were readying food. My grandfather desires you to comprehend what you will encounter at sundown. They reached a dwelling larger than the rest, adorned with markings that appeared to narrate stories Sterling couldn't decipher. The elder waited within, positioned on a woven mat with various items arranged before him. Sterling identified his horse's bridle among them, but other items existed too. A blade with an elaborate grip, a small clay vessel containing what resembled paint, and a bundle of sage secured with cord. The elder motioned for Sterling to sit opposite him. When he spoke, his voice held the weight of ceremony and heritage. Ayana conveyed carefully, stopping regularly to guarantee precision. He states the selection ceremony has 3 segments. First, you must show that your offering came from authentic concern, not from pursuing benefit or recognition. Second, you must prove that you comprehend the holy nature of sacrifice by performing one yourself. Third, you must establish that you can prioritize the tribe's welfare above your own survival. Sterling felt cold perspiration begin forming despite the dwelling's warmth. What kind of sacrifice? And how precisely do I establish that final part? The elder seemed to grasp English better than he voiced it because he answered before Ayana could convey. He lifted the elaborate blade and positioned it so the edge captured the light entering through the dwelling's opening. Then he spoke in Apache, his manner solemn and ceremonial. Ayana's face lost color as she listened. When she conveyed, her voice barely rose above a murmur. The sacrifice is an examination of faith. You must permit yourself to be restrained and positioned in a circumstance where only the tribe's compassion will preserve your life. If your initial offering was genuine, they will rescue you. If it was dishonest, they will allow you to perish as punishment for violating their holy laws. Sterling stared at the blade, grasping now why the 70 warriors had appeared so composed and expectant. They weren't present to battle him. They were present to evaluate him. And based on that evaluation, they would either accept him as kin or observe him perish for the offense of dishonest kindness. The elder placed down the blade and lifted the clay vessel. He dipped his finger in the paint and marked a symbol on his own forehead, then presented the vessel to Sterling. The message was obvious. The ceremony was already starting, whether Sterling was prepared or not. Outside, the sun had shifted considerably toward the western skyline. Sterling realized with increasing dread that he had roughly 2 hours to choose whether to submit to an examination that could readily kill him, or to attempt fleeing across open land on foot while being chased by 70 mounted warriors. Either option seemed like a route to death, but one would at least maintain his dignity in the perception of people who had already demonstrated him more acknowledgement than he merited. Sterling accepted the clay vessel with shaking hands, the burden of his choice settling on him like a boulder. The paint remained warm from the elder's contact, and its earthy aroma brought to mind the adobe chapel where his mother used to worship. He considered her now, wondering what she would have advised him to do in a circumstance that no Sunday teaching had ever equipped him for. The elder observed patiently as Sterling dipped his finger in the paint. The old man's gaze held no criticism, only the kind of constant attention that came from a lifetime of observing people confront impossible decisions. When Sterling finally drew the same marking on his forehead that the elder displayed, the old man acknowledged with something that might have been relief. "You have decided to trust us with your existence," Ayana conveyed as the elder spoke. "Now we must ready you for what arrives at sundown." They guided Sterling outside where the complete settlement seemed to be in activity. Men were positioning stones in a broad circle. Women were braiding long ropes from plant strands, and children were collecting specific wood types that Sterling didn't identify. Everyone moved with the smooth efficiency of people who had executed these duties numerous times previously. But an underlying tension existed that indicated this ceremony wasn't ordinary. "How frequently does this occur?" Sterling questioned Ayana as they traveled toward the stone circle. "The horse offering ceremony. Not frequently. Perhaps once in a lifetime, if at all. Most people aren't reckless enough to surrender their only means of existence for a stranger." She stopped, examining his expression. "Or courageous enough." 3 young warriors approached, bearing what resembled ceremonial garments. The elder addressed them briefly, then returned to Sterling. Through Ayana, he clarified that Sterling must wear traditional Apache clothing during the ceremony, as his own garments symbolized the realm he was deciding to abandon. As Sterling changed garments, he observed that the 70 warriors from the ridge had stationed themselves around the settlement boundary. They were no longer observing him specifically, but their presence created an unmistakable statement. There would be no escape once the ceremony commenced. The white feathers they carried were now fastened to their horses' bridles, forming an eerie visual reminder of Sterling's commitment. "Tell me regarding the first examination," Sterling said to Ayanna as she assisted him adjust the strange garments. "The one about establishing my offering was authentic." Ayanna wavered, glancing toward her grandfather before responding. "You must speak honestly about why you assisted me, but not just speak. You must permit the tribe's most discerning members to interrogate you while you are restrained and incapable of defending yourself with anything except words. They will question you with things designed to reveal any concealed intentions, any selfishness, any falsehoods you tell yourself regarding your own virtue." Sterling felt his stomach tighten. "And if they determine I was deceiving myself regarding my intentions, then the ceremony concludes immediately and you are escorted to the boundary of our territory and freed. Your horse is given back to you and you are permitted to depart. But you are also identified permanently as someone who can't be relied upon, and no Apache will ever assist you again, regardless of how desperate your circumstances." The sun had shifted noticeably lower, projecting longer shadows across the settlement. Sterling could observe that the stone circle was almost finished, and several elders had assembled near it, discussing something in quiet tones. Their expressions were grave, and sometimes one of them would glance in his direction with an intensity that made his flesh crawl. "What occurs if I pass the first examination?" Sterling questioned, though he wasn't certain he wanted to understand. Ayanna's expression turned grim. "Then you confront the second examination, the examination of sacrifice. And that one, my new companion, is far more hazardous than having your intentions interrogated." The sun contacted the skyline as Sterling found himself positioned in the center of the stone circle, his hands secured behind his back with rope that felt stronger than hide. The complete settlement had assembled around the boundary, their faces lit by torches that projected moving shadows across the gathered crowd. The 70 warriors formed an exterior ring, motionless as guards, their white feathers shifting gently in the evening air. 5 elders sat facing Sterling, each one displaying elaborate paint designs that identified their position as evaluators in this ancient procedure. The elderly man, Ayanna's grandfather, sat in the middle, bordered by 2 men and 2 women whose lined faces revealed decades spent making life and death choices for their people. Ayanna stood beside her grandfather, prepared to convey, but Sterling sensed that some of these elders grasped English better than they revealed. The way they observed his expression when he spoke indicated they were interpreting more than just his statements. The interrogation commenced gently. Why had he been in Apache lands? Sterling clarified about seeking new grazing territory after the drought had devastated his small property. Where was his kin? Gone, he informed them honestly. His parents deceased from illness, his sister from childbirth complications. No spouse or youngsters of his own. Then the questions became more direct. Had he assisted Ayanna because he anticipated gaining something from the Apache people? Sterling rejected this, clarifying that he had anticipated nothing except difficulty from his deeds. Did he regard himself as a virtuous man who merited reward for his compassion? This question made Sterling stop because he wasn't certain how to respond honestly. "I don't know if I'm virtuous," he finally stated. "I just understand that abandoning someone to perish when I could assist felt incorrect." The female elder to his left spoke in rapid Apache, her manner sharp and challenging. Ayanna conveyed reluctantly. She questions why you didn't attempt to transport me to your own people for medical attention. Why deliver me to the Apache when you could have been regarded as a champion among whites for rescuing me? Sterling felt perspiration forming despite the cool evening atmosphere. The question penetrated something he hadn't completely examined in his own thoughts. Because she belonged with her own people, transporting her away from everything she understood would have been another form of cruelty. The male elder to his right leaned ahead and spoke a single sentence in Apache. Ayanna's eyes enlarged as she conveyed. He states, "You speak of cruelty, Yet you condemned yourself to travel 20 miles through hazardous country with no horse, no weapons, and minimal water. Was this compassion to yourself, or was it punishment for some guilt you bear? The question struck Sterling like a physical impact. Images flashed through his thoughts. His sister's expression as she perished because he couldn't transport her to a physician in time. His parents' burial sites that he had deserted when the property failed. All the occasions he had selected the secure route instead of the correct one. Was rescuing Ayanna an act of redemption or just another method to harm himself? Perhaps both, he murmured, and the honesty of it astonished him. The 5 elders conversed among themselves in voices too quiet for him to perceive. Sterling observed their expressions, attempting to interpret faces that disclosed nothing. Eventually, Ayanna's grandfather rose and addressed the crowd in ceremonial tones that traveled across the complete settlement. When he concluded speaking, Ayanna approached Sterling with moisture in her eyes. You have passed the first examination. The elders trust your spirit was genuine when you assisted me. She stopped, wiping her expression. But now arrives the examination of sacrifice, and I must caution you what they are about to request of you. Even I don't understand if I could accomplish it. 2 young Apache men approached Sterling with a wooden container that they positioned beside him with respectful attention. When Ayanna's grandfather opened it, Sterling observed the contents and felt his blood freeze. Inside were 5 arrows, each one identified with a different colored strip, and a small piece of hide with markings painted on it. The elder lifted the hide and displayed it to the crowd, speaking in ceremonial tones that traveled across the quiet settlement. When he concluded, Ayanna approached Sterling with clear reluctance. The examination of sacrifice requires you to select which member of our tribe will confront danger to establish your worthiness, she stated, her voice barely rising above a murmur. 5 of our people have volunteered to endanger their lives for your ceremony. The arrows symbolize different ordeals, each one hazardous, but survivable if the person is capable and blessed with fortune. Sterling stared at the arrows, horrified. I don't comprehend. I'm supposed to select someone else to endanger their life for me? That's not sacrifice. That's cruelty. That is precisely the purpose, Ayanna replied. The examination evaluates whether you will permit others to suffer for your advantage, or whether you will discover another method. Many who accept this examination select an arrow immediately, believing that someone else's danger is acceptable payment for their own acceptance into the tribe. The elder spoke once more and Ayanna continued conveying. But another option exists. You can decline to choose an arrow and instead propose to confront all 5 ordeals yourself. This has never been accomplished because nobody can survive all 5 ordeals alone. It would be certain death. Sterling felt the burden of an impossible choice crushing down on him. Around the circle, he could observe 5 Apache volunteers standing prepared. A young man barely beyond boyhood, a middle-aged woman with compassionate eyes, an older warrior with scars marking his arms, a teenage girl who reminded him painfully of his deceased sister, and a man approximately his own age with a spouse and small youngsters visible in the crowd behind him. What are the ordeals? Sterling questioned, though he suspected the response wouldn't assist his choice. Ayanna indicated each arrow sequentially. The red arrow means traversing the rapids at Devil's Canyon at night. The black arrow means entering the cave where the mountain cat dens and retrieving a stone from the deepest chamber. The white arrow means ascending the cliff face that nobody has successfully climbed in living memory. The yellow arrow means traveling alone into the territory of the rival tribe that killed 3 of our people last spring and returning with evidence of peaceful contact. The blue arrow means, she stopped, her voice breaking slightly. The blue arrow means permitting yourself to be bitten by a rattlesnake and depending on traditional medicine to preserve your life. Each ordeal represented almost certain death, and Sterling was anticipated to select which innocent person would perish for his acceptance into a tribe he had never requested to enter. The 70 warriors observed from their locations around the settlement boundary, their white feathers now appearing less like decoration and more like markers for a burial that hadn't yet occurred. Sterling closed his eyes and considered his sister's final statements to him. She had informed him that genuine courage wasn't about being fearless, but about doing what was correct, even when fear consumed you. She had also informed him that some matters were worth perishing for, and protecting innocent people was at the summit of that list. When he opened his eyes, Sterling looked straight at Ayana's grandfather. "I won't select an arrow. If someone has to confront these ordeals for my acceptance, it will be me. All 5 ordeals tonight." The elder's expression didn't alter, but something shifted in his gaze that might have been acknowledgement. The crowd murmured in astonishment, and the 5 volunteers looked at Sterling with expressions ranging from relief to amazement. But it was the response of the 70 warriors that astonished him most. As one, they removed the white feathers from their horses' bridles and lifted them high overhead, forming a forest of pale plumes against the darkening heavens. Ayana's grandfather rose gradually from his seated location, his lined face displaying deep feeling as he examined Sterling's resolute expression. The elder spoke in Apache, his voice traveling across the quiet settlement with the authority of absolute choice. When he concluded, the 70 warriors responded with a sound Sterling had never encountered previously, a low, rhythmic chant that appeared to originate from the earth itself. Ayana moved forward, moisture streaming down her expression as she conveyed her grandfather's statements. He states, "No man in the history of our people has ever proposed to confront all 5 ordeals alone. Such willingness to perish rather than cause harm to innocent people establishes a spirit that is already Apache, whether the blood runs Apache or not." The elder continued speaking, and his next statements caused visible shock among the assembled crowd. Ayana's voice trembled as she conveyed. He states, "The ordeals are concluded. You have already passed the examination of sacrifice by establishing you would rather perish than permit others to suffer for your advantage. The horse offering law is satisfied, and you are proclaimed kinsman to our tribe." Sterling felt confusion blend with relief. "But I haven't actually accomplished anything yet. I just stated I would." The elder grinned for the first occasion since Sterling had encountered him, and when he spoke once more, his statements carried gentle wisdom. Through Ayana, he clarified, "The ordeals exist to disclose the spirit, not to cause death. A man who selects certain death over possible harm to others has displayed his spirit completely. No additional evidence is required." What occurred next took Sterling's breath away. The 70 warriors dismounted in perfect synchronization and commenced traveling toward the stone circle. As they approached, each one knelt and positioned his white feather at Sterling's feet, then removed something from his belt or saddle pack. Sterling observed in amazement as a pile of contributions grew before him: beautifully fashioned blades, hand-woven blankets, carved jewelry. And finally, one warrior brought forth Sterling's own horse, now wearing new Apache equipment adorned with markings of honor and acknowledgement. The lead warrior, the same silver-haired man who had first approached Sterling that morning, moved forward and spoke in measured English. "White kinsman, we arrived here to witness evaluation. We anticipated transporting a body away for burial or guiding a new tribal member to our camps in the mountains. We didn't anticipate meeting a man worthy of the greatest honor our people can grant." "What honor?" Sterling questioned, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was occurring. The warrior grinned. "You are invited to bear the protection of 70 families. Each feather symbolizes a warrior's pledge that your safety is as significant as the safety of his own youngsters. Each contribution symbolizes a household that will shelter you, nourish you, and defend you as long as you exist. This has been granted to only 3 white men in all our history, and never previously to a man who wasn't born among us." Ayana's grandfather approached Sterling and positioned both palms on his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice held the burden of holy ceremony. He states, "You arrived to us as a stranger who gave a contribution. You depart as a kinsman who received 70 contributions in return. Your horse was returned with honor markings that will guarantee safe passage through any Apache territory. But more than that, you have demonstrated our people that some white men comprehend the genuine meaning of courage and sacrifice." Sterling mounted his horse, sensing the burden of 70 white feathers secured to his saddle, and the warmth of acceptance he had never anticipated to discover. As he readied to depart the settlement, the complete tribe assembled to see him off, their expressions displaying acknowledgement that would have been impossible to picture just hours previously. Ayana approached his horse one final occasion. "Where will you travel now, kinsman?" Sterling looked toward the skyline where his old existence waited, then back at the Apache settlement where he had discovered something regarding himself he never knew existed. "I think I'll head north toward the mountains. I hear there's quality grazing territory up there, and it appears I have some new neighbors to become acquainted with." The 70 warriors mounted their horses and formed an honor escort as Sterling rode out of the settlement. Their presence around him felt like protection, kin, and home all at once. The white feathers on his saddle captured the starlight, marking him permanently as a man who had been examined by fire and emerged as something greater than he had ever pictured possible. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us keep bringing you more stories like these.